The show is starting. Welcome everybody. My name's Rob Buchanan. I am part of the Environmental Studies program at the New School. And I really want to thank you all for coming today. I know that it's been a long winter. I don't think we've had a Saturday like this since October. So that you guys are here at all and in this room is really great. We really appreciate that. It is a commitment. So thank you for that. So briefly, what's going to happen today is we're going to have a talk from and with Hunter Lovins. We're then going to move on to a series of presentations, some blocks of presentations, a block of workshops, presentations, workshops, and a final round of presentations, and then we'll wrap it up with a mapping exercise and a discussion about overcoming apathy. And then we're going to hand out some money. And that money is not prizes. It is seed money for projects that you guys decide are worthy. And Emily will explain the rules for that and how that's going to work, but that's what happens at the very end of the day. Okay. If you get hungry, go over there. We've got more food coming around 4 o'clock. I think there may be a stretching exercise at some point if people show signs of fatigue, so be prepared for that. And I'm about to turn this over to the students who organized this event, but I did want to say one thing about, or just make a brief statement about environmental studies at the New School. What we're trying, this is a small program, and so far only 50 graduates. So we're new and we're small, and only been around about 4 years. What we're trying to do is combine science, policy, and design. And we think that is an innovative approach to urban environmentalism. We draw from all the divisions of the New School. I think you know that Parsons is a part of, most of you know that Parsons is a part of the New School. That's where some of our design thinking is coming from. But a number of other divisions as well are involved in this interdisciplinary effort. Now, I know that a lot of you are part of other innovative environmental studies programs, and so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that we don't really think that we're unique. We know everybody is trying to move ahead in this field, and the idea of this event, one idea behind this event, is to try and get us all together and to form a regional movement for sustainability issues and concerns so that we can really work together on this, which is one of the central ideas behind sustainability anyway. Okay, so some quick thanks, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Environmental Studies program, obviously, for putting this on, to our funders, the New School's University Student Senate, and to the Green Fund, who both put up the money for this, to Hunter for agreeing to come and for agreeing to redo her presentation on the train this morning based on some frantic last-minute emails. That was fantastic. And most of all, to the 10 students who spent their spring organizing this conference. And I now want to introduce one of those students, Hannah Brown.
Hello. All right. So with us today, as Rob said, is Hunter Lovins, professor, president, and founder of Natural Capitalism Solutions, which educates companies, communities, and countries about sustainability. Hunter is the recipient of such honors as the Right Livelihood Award, the Lindbergh Award, and Leadership in Business, and was named Time Magazine 2000 Hero of the Planet, and in 2009, Newsweek dubbed her a green business icon. She has co-authored many, many papers and 14 books, including the 1999 book, Natural Capitalism, a couple others, a recent one, The Way Out, Kickstarting Capitalism to Save Our Economic Ass. She has served on boards of governments, not-for-profit, and for-profit companies, and we're glad to have her here with us today to kick things off. So we'll be hearing more about her work, and then Zach and I have a few questions ourselves, and if anyone else has questions, we'll open it up before the first block of presentations. So please welcome Hunter Lovins.
As Rob said, thank you all very much for coming to this conversation on such a glorious day. I don't think there is a more important conversation to be having now. And I'm going to talk a bit about the good news and then a little bit about the bad news and then a little bit about what we might be able to do about that. The good news is that sustainability is happening. It's breaking out everywhere, whether it be articles in Harvard Business Review or green certifications or my friend Yvonne Chenard of Patagonia getting the cover of Fortune magazine or Save Us Walmart going green. When the evil empire goes green, you know you're winning. I started tracking, I don't know, about 5-6 years ago, studies showing that the companies that are the leaders in sustainability are outperforming the less sustainable companies. When we hit 40 of them at Natural Capitalism, we did this study of studies, and you can download it for free from our website, Sustainability Pays. There are now 53 such studies that I've found. I'm sure there are more out there that have escaped my notice. Harvard, when Harvard gets it, it's a little like Walmart. When Harvard gets it, you know you're onto something. Sustainability isn't the burden on the bottom line that it was thought to be. It is the touchstone of all of innovation. And in the future, only companies that have it as a goal will achieve competitive advantage. When those wild-eyed environmentalists at Goldman Sachs tell you that the companies that are the leaders in environment, social, and good governance policy have 25% higher stock value than their less sustainable competitors, there's a business case. Corporate leaders, this is my current favorite corporate leader, Paul Pullman of Unilever, said a couple years back, I'm not going to report quarterly to Wall Street. He said this mentality of being in thrall to the day traders is not good for my company, and if I do that, if I try to make my quarterly reports show profit quarter on quarter on quarter on quarter, the only way you're going to do that is to fire people and to not make the kinds of investments that will enable me to grow a sustainable company. He said that's nuts. And it contributed to the 2008 collapse, and I'm not going to do it. He committed to what he called the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, cut their environmental impact in half while still growing the company, source everything that is a feedstock that comes from something grown from sustainable agriculture, and help the lives of 1 billion people. Go, Paul. We now know that entrepreneurs, innovators, bringing to market disruptive technologies that cause the use of less carbon have better financial performance than ordinary companies. And it's directly related to their ability to successfully implement this disruptive market innovation. This is a study out of the top 350 companies with combined market cap of $350 trillion. The companies that are leading in low carbon innovation are outperforming. Conversely, the carbon intensive companies, even in a country where there is no price on carbon, the carbon intensive companies are being punished in the marketplace. Richard Branson, entrepreneur, Jigger Shaw, entrepreneur, Richard, of course, of Virgin, Jigger of SunEdison, founded the Carbon War Room to demonstrate ways to cut our carbon emissions. He said, we're at 32 gigatons of carbon emissions every year. We need to get to 14. We've got to cut 17. To stay below 2 degrees C. Now, 2 degrees C is what the scientists say is the safe level. Safe means 50-50 chance we will not have catastrophe. If I said, come drive with me, 50-50 chance we won't get in a fatal wreck, believe you'd go with him. So 2 degrees C is not safe, but it's the upper bound that the scientists say that we should possibly countenance getting to. It'd be better to be at 1.5 degrees C above his pre-industrial levels. So Jigger said, how do we do that? And he just wrote a book called Creating Climate Wealth. Jigger now lives here in New York. He's somebody you ought to come talk to your classes. Cool entrepreneur. He said 100,000 companies to sell each 10 million worth of climate change solutions by 2020, and this would create a $10 trillion economy. Y'all want jobs when you graduate? Yeah. This is how you're going to get them, is creating this new economy. Jigger pointed out, due to technological innovation, it will always be cost effective to cut about half of the energy that we're now using. You know, people say, oh, well, if I conserve, then I can't cut back if I really need to conserve. That's just not true. And Carbon War Room recently released this document on how to create climate wealth in the built environment. HSBC reckons that the size of cutting energy waste in the built environment is $87 billion per year. Potential by 2020, $245 billion per year business opportunity. McKinsey is calling it a $1.2 trillion opportunity. I was with the Carbon Disclosure Project here in New York City on the floor of the Exchange last September when Tom Rivet-Carnac, their young president of North American operations, announced a new study that CDP has done showing, again, the leaders in reporting to CDP on what their carbon emissions are. This is just companies that commit to report. Have higher return on equity, 5.2%, greater stability in cash flow, and higher growth. Twice the average total return of the Global 500 between 2005 2011. Again, these are companies that are just paying attention. They haven't even committed to do anything. They're just paying attention. Because as soon as you start to pay attention, you start to see opportunities to cut your cost, and you start implementing it. CDP has shown that if US businesses cut their carbon emissions just 3% a year, just 3%, this would drive $190 billion in savings by 2020 and be enough to keep carbon emissions from driving a climate crisis. Mark Jacobson at Stanford has shown that we can meet the needs of the world. Once you've done the cost-effective efficiency, we can meet all of our energy needs from renewable energy. And it's quicker and cheaper to do it this way. And it's happening. Solar is sweeping. About 2 weeks ago, Goldman Sachs came out with a report, The Era of Renewables, in which they noted that there are now utility-scale solar installations on offer to the utilities at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. In Austin, Texas, in Minnesota, and there's one in California at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Anybody know your average price of electricity here? 9. Yeah, about 9 to 11. Peak's gonna be 20 odd. Half that. Utility scale solar being commercially offered at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Now Goldman said, yeah, but that's because of the tax credits. I give you a little secret. All energy gets tax credits. And the carbon intensive energy, the International Energy Agency reckons $550 billion every year being spent on subsidizing fossil energy around the world. Just fossil energy, $550 billion. The International Monetary Fund reckons it's $1.9 trillion of your and my tax money every year being spent to make fossil energy look cheaper than it really is. So, you know, Goldman, in a sense, is playing both sides of the street here. But Goldman then went on to say something very interesting. They said, unsubsidized, if you look at the long-run trajectory of the price of gas, natural gas, solar will be cheaper than that. The natural gas will come in 10.8, 10.7, 10.9 cents per kilowatt hour. The solar will come in around 10. Goldman said, it's over. It's the era of renewables. Pretty cool, huh? The world's nearing 100 gigawatts of solar. A gigawatt is roughly a nuclear-sized chunk of electricity. Japan, in the wake of Fukushima, put in place what's called a Feedin Tariff. This says we will pay you a fair price if you put in renewables. Germany did this and led the way, and created over 500,000 new jobs. It's one of the reasons Germany is economically healthy. China is investing hugely in renewables. In our climate negotiations, we say, well, we're not going to do anything until China does. Guess what? China is. 70% of new power generation since 2012 has come from renewables. Wind. I've never heard anybody call for an evacuation plan from a wind farm. Wind spills, that's a bad one. My friend Steiner at UN Environment, we could create between 15 million and 60 million new green economy jobs. Half the global workforce will be green by 2030. This is the future. And indeed, what I call with John Fullerton the regenerative economy employs already over 3 million people, more than the fossil industry does. It outperformed the general economy in the down economy. It offers higher pay. The kinds of jobs you create when you unleash a green economy are jobs in manufacturing. 25% of the green economy jobs are in manufacturing compared to 9% for the economy as a whole. Here's the bad news. The way we do business today is fundamentally unsustainable. Sir John Beddington, chief scientist of the UK, quoted by Jonathan Porritt, said it is this unsustainability of the way we do business that drove the '08 collapse. And until we recognize that the assault on the environment is also an assault on the economy, we will continue to lurch from collapse to collapse to collapse. This just out today. I copied this on the train coming down. Next week, because literally right now, while we are here, the climate negotiators on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change are in Berlin. They are about to release the third panel report of the fifth IPCC review. Needed shift to low carbon energy would cost between 2 and 6% of the world's economic output by 2050. But the Stern report showed us if we do not address the climate crisis, we will every year be paying up to 20% of global GDP dealing with the consequences. Here in New York area, you're dealing with the consequences of Sandy, still cleaning up neighborhoods, still spending money. These storms will become more common and more severe. The report said nations will have to impose drastic curbs on their still rising greenhouse gas emissions if we're going to keep it below 2 degrees C. To avoid these dangers, society will need to rapidly reduce use of fossil fuel and also revolutionize the structures of economies, food systems, and energy grids. So here's the challenge to those of you about to enter the workforce. We're going to have to rebuild everything. The good news is we're going to have to rebuild everything. When they say cost, that's an investment. That's an investment in building things again. And here's why. We are losing badly. Global Biodiversity Outlook 3, science from Dr. Tom Lovejoy at the Smithsonian and a lot of scientists. 3 of the world's ecosystems are tipping into collapse. Coral reefs, sorry scuba divers, business as usual. By 2030, 2050, there will be no living coral reefs on planet Earth. The Amazon, this is the Earth's lungs, and we're losing it because of the warming. And the oceans are acidifying. You may recall about a month ago there was a news report about a scallop company out in the Pacific Northwest that lost its entire crop of scallops because the ocean is acidifying. Now, we can all live without scallops, but an acid ocean destroys the ability of the little calciferous critters called phytoplankton to have intact shells. Phytoplankton are what give the earth about half of its oxygen. Every other breath you breathe comes because of phytoplankton. But this has happened on Earth before. CO2 concentrations went up, temperature went up. I mean, there used to be crocodiles and palm trees in Greenland. We weren't around. And 60 to 90% of species went extinct. And this is what we are in the midst of right now, the sixth great extinction. The difference, this time we're causing it. So your future is going to be a bit turbulent. And landing this enterprise called humanity safely is going to be a bit tricky. You know, George Carlin, save the earth will be fine. It'll shake us off like a bad case of fleas. We're not talking about saving the earth, we're talking about saving humans. We're talking about saving life as we know it. And we're talking about creating a world that works for 100% of humanity, as Bucky Fuller put it. Normal now is you go out and buy clothes so you can get dressed up, so you can drive through traffic in a car you're still paying for to get to the job you need to pay for the clothes and the car and the house that you're not in because you're at work. Is this the life we want to live? And this is what's killing the planet, this mental model of how we run an economy. Do we want to be consumers? Is this the highest and best use of a human being? What's wrong with this picture? This is the economy we have today. We and nature are in service to the economy, which is in service to finance. We need to flip this. This is the basic wisdom of the ecological economists, that finance is a tool that should be in service to an economy, enabling money to flow into the real economy, into entrepreneurs who need capital, into rebuilding the system. And the economy ought to be in service to delivering all of us the quality of life that we want. So this is our big challenge. Wendell Berry, the poet, I think said it best. We're lost. Our economy has become an anti-economy, a financial system without a sound economic basis and without economic virtues. What do? I was asked by the King of Bhutan, this is the Prime Minister of Bhutan, to reinvent the global economy. My reaction was, help. And so I went around asking everybody that I know who knows more about this than I do. Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett wrote a beautiful book called The Spirit Level about inequality in our society and how it is destroying our society, about the human side of rebuilding the economy. Dr. Robert Costanza, one of the founders of ecological economics, and this guy, John Fullerton. Fullerton was 18 years a banker at J.P. Morgan. Left as managing director. He helped invent their practice in derivatives, managed that, private equity, commodities from Tokyo to London to Wall Street. And in 2001, he watched the towers come down and he walked away. He said, something is rotten. And he spent 6 years, built a room in his barn upstate, and spent 6 years reading and thinking. And in 2008, he created a little group called Capital Institute to try to transform finance and to set forth this idea that he calls a regenerative economy. And you can read a bit about it in a paper that he and I wrote in Fast Company. He's about to release a big paper on it. It has 8 principles, or it did a month ago. He's reconsidering whether he wants it to be 7 principles. I sent him a paper that people can only hold 7 things in their head at once. So now he's reconsidering if it's 7. But these are the basic concepts, that we hold the continuation of life as sacred. This ecological economics concept that the economy is embedded in a society which is itself embedded in nature. Entrepreneurialism, that we celebrate this innate tendency of human beings to create anew. That we view wealth holistically, that there's nothing wrong with money, there's nothing wrong with stuff. But what we are running now might better be called a liquidation economy, in which we are destroying human capital and natural capital in pursuit of money and stuff. And so we need to hold all forms of capital in balance. Economic democracy. Do you have a say in the economy that affects you? Not anymore, not after Citizens United and just a week or so ago, McCutcheon. It's who has the most money that determines who's going to be elected to Congress, unless we stop them. A circular economy, this is the concept of Walter Stahel out of Europe. Bill McDonough trademarked it as cradle to cradle. That's actually Stahel's term. Edge effect abundance. This is diversity. In nature, the most diverse, abundant ecosystems are where ecosystems come together, where a river meets an ocean, where a forest meets a meadow. If you lack diversity in an economy, in a species, in an ecosystem, you're impoverishing that ecosystem. Resilience, balancing economic efficiency with the living system's resilience. And then finally, honoring place. Right now we have a global economy that is a monoculture, a homogenized economy of McDonald's for everybody. Again, is this what we want? We may be able to find a better way of stating a vision of the future that we want, but I haven't found it. And so I have committed my life in service to working with John and this concept of a regenerative economy. And I do that in a number of ways. One of them is that I teach here in Manhattan once a month. I come to the Bard MBA program. And if any of you are thinking that you might want to do the kind of work that I'm doing, highly recommend you consider an MBA. Not a Harvard MBA, not a conventional MBA. That's what got us the system that doesn't work, but an MBA in sustainability. If you're interested in policy, if you want to go into government, if you want to start forming policy, we have a master's upstate in sustainable policy. You can get the MS in environmental policy, MS in climate science and policy, or an MBA in sustainability. And in fact, you can do both. You can do a combined master's. That's a really powerful degree. We're going to have to reinvent everything. We're going to have to reinvent education. I've been much impressed. This is now the second time I've lectured here at the New School, in the kind of thinking that goes on here, and the integration of design and of culture, of literature, of the arts, in the sciences, in business, in policy. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us to rethink, what about the world we have today that isn't working, and what do we want? And then how do we get there? Again, the good news is it's starting to happen. I've been at this for long enough that if I were any damn good, we'd have solved these problems. It's starting to happen. I can go back and quote you passages out of books that I wrote in the 70s, saying essentially what I'm saying today, and thinking it's just around the corner, it's just about to happen. The economics are so good. And it didn't. Winston Churchill said, Americans can be counted on to do the right thing when they've exhausted all alternatives. We're darn near there, yeah? But I like this quote from Bucky. who said, "We are called to be the architects of the future, not its victims." And this is really the opportunity for every one of you. You've chosen to spend the most beautiful day in what, 6 months, 9 months? Sitting in a room with the curtains drawn. Why? Because you want to be the architects. And I'm honored that you asked me here to talk about it. Thank you. And for those of you who want, I'd be happy to give you the deck. If anybody's got a stick, I'll give you the deck so that if it's of any use to you, you can use it.
Great. So, why don't you two go ahead and...
Yeah, grab the mic.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we each have a question or two, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. Do you want to start?
Sure. So I guess my question is kind of on a macro level about considering natural and human capital, and to what extent systemically are those allowed. Made the comment about working towards a world that works for 100% of humanity. And I'm just wondering that if capital is, based on competition, and that creates inherent hierarchies, that creates, disparities in wealth, how is that understood within the model of recognizing human capital? And the other, in terms of natural capital, it's again a systemic kind of issue that I wonder about is to what extent is a system based on profit, on accumulating commodities past just their immediate utility, how is that sustainable? How do we do that and not do it too much?
Pair of simple questions, eh? There are two kinds of answers to that, I think. The first is look to living systems for guidelines of how to organize societies that can last for billions of years, not just the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands that human societies have. And if you consider our democracy, it's, a little over 200 years old. This is tiny in the scope of life. And yet there are natural systems that have endured for millennia, for billions of years, and that regenerate themselves. If something happens to them, they regenerate themselves. So that would be the first answer. In nature, is there profit?
Yes.
Good, where?
I mean, every organism has to put more out than it takes in, and that by definition is profit. So I mean, if you go to a fruit tree, the fruits are profit.
This can get into a very long discussion. Is fruit profit? Profit is, in your question, profit was a limited pool of individuals accreting wealth to themselves in ways that others cannot.
Yeah, I don't view it like that way. I think that a lot of people think that GDP is that output of goods and services in the economy, not paper wealth. And I mean, you spoke to that. Yeah, I was saying that GDP is represented by goods and services output in an economy in a given period, and that's represented by real wealth, which is fruit, food, houses, clothes, not paper wealth. And I think you addressed that in your presentation. It's not about the dollars, that are accrued by, certain individuals, but I mean, it's about producing something that everyone, by helping to build it, they benefit themselves as well. So if you look at like a community of ants or something like that, that's a great example,
Yeah, do bees make profit by making honey, and what happens to it? And I think when you start to ask and truly examine these kinds of analogies, and then say, how would we organize human society? the way that bees are organized? Or would that even be a good idea? And Janine Benyus, the founder of what's called biomimicry, is very clear. Biomimicry is not a religion. We should not slavishly take what we think is a natural answer and insist upon it, but that as humans, and we are part of nature, we should consider these lessons, these learnings, be as students to nature, and then decide on what are the rules and regulations by which we want to govern ourselves. And this is really the answer to your question, that policy has to come back to being something in which we all engage. Democracy is a contact sport. And if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Now, we are now living in a time, let's see if I can do this a little bit better. Come on. View. It wants to save itself. Thank you. We're now living at a time of greater inequality than any since the 1929 Depression. This has been caused by policy. And in particular, it was caused by a particular economic ideology. I've been studying of late some history. When a group of 37 people, led by Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, and Milton Friedman, got together at a place called Mount Pelerin outside of Montreux, Switzerland, and founded the Mount Pelerin Society to put in place an economic ideology that essentially said greed is good, and that we should organize our economy so that government gets off the back of business. They were extraordinarily successful. This is Hayek with Ronald Reagan. Their members took 8 Nobel Economics Prizes. 2 of them became heads of state, and they became advisors to essentially every head of state around the world. Extraordinarily successful intellectual exercise. And they put forth this notion of austerity, that we should manage our economic affairs the way you would manage your household. If you have overspent your budget, you have to cut back. It's a race to the bottom. And again, we have created this incredible inequality in which most of us are underwater. A few of us are celebrating. And this was very deliberately done. And from 47, when after World War II with the New Deal, we all grew together because we had economic policies striving for equality. When Mr. Reagan came into office in 1980, from then until the Great Recession, we grew apart to the point where now 85 people have the same wealth as the bottom poorest half of the population on Earth. 85 people. We did this to ourselves. And the good news of that is if we did it, we can undo it. And we know partly what does it: unequal pay. So countries like Australia have recently put in place a minimum wage of $15 an hour. Now states are looking at putting in place higher minimum wages. Bringing down the excessive pay for CEOs and up the pay of the bottom would be a good policy step. And then I think we can begin to answer the kinds of questions that you're posing. What we know now, though, is this economic system is killing our people, it's killing our planet. And what's really clear all of the ecological collapses are going to hit the poorest people first and worst. You know, climate change, bring it on. I live in Colorado. I'll have oceanfront property. You guys here in New York will have a problem.
I think, yeah. Due to time, I think I'm just gonna let my question remain on my paper and open it up to everybody else. Does anybody else have a question?
I forgot to. There's one here, there's one there. He wants the show. Go ahead, whoever has the mic.
Behind you.
Hi there. Oh, it's quite loud. I'm Doug Eshelman. I guess one of the questions I had, are there countries in the world, maybe for example some of the Scandinavian countries, that could offer examples into kind of how we can go back towards kind of a more equal playing field and have a better opportunity for people in all different types of classes? I think, you know, the quality of life that you see in like a Netherlands or a Denmark might offer some insights into what we can do differently, because it doesn't seem like this is a complete global problem. It might be you know, tied to only a subset of nations across the world. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's most pernicious in our own country. This philosophy of austerity, though, has been sweeping Europe, and even in the Scandinavian countries, which have held on to something of a market socialist tradition, there is a lot of pressure to begin implementing this kind of austerity and this modern economic thinking. There's an ideological war going on now between the followers of Mount Pelerin and the people who grew out of the trade unions movement that started in Europe, came to this country, and it's up in the air who's going to win. Right now, the rich country in Europe is Germany with Mrs. Merkel, who believes in the Mount Pelerin austerity approach and is haranguing her Nordic colleagues to overturn these socialist tendencies. I hope the Nordic countries hang on to this belief in a high quality of life, but it's not clear that they will. I think that would be a very healthy debate to have in this country. If somebody says, you're a socialist, I mean, it's much better to be gay, yeah, than to be a socialist. Or to smell bad than to be a socialist. That's terrible. What is socialism as a political philosophy? It's got to the point where it is so taboo we won't even talk about what does it mean. The notion that the government is going to put in place regulations to try to deliver a society, a social order that enables most people to live the kind of life we would all aspire to. And until we can at least have a civil debate over it, it's going to be a little tough. The MBA is here in Manhattan. The policy program is upstate. But you'd be welcome at either.
If you had any words of advice for, I think most of us in this room are students, so what would you say to either your former self or somebody who is like trying to get into this field?
First of all, decide where in the world you want to be. There are programs of this sort hither and yon. I teach at another similar program in Seattle. I used to teach at one in San Francisco. We're trying to rebuild a good program in San Francisco. There are about 5 programs, MBA programs around the country that I would say give you the kind of education that you need to Well, to lead any business. If what I started out with is true, that there's a business case for sustainability, why on earth would you go to Harvard where they haven't cottoned on to this yet? I mean, sorry to bash Harvard, but most MBA programs don't get it yet. Now, the AACSB, which is the entity that accredits business programs, came out last year and said, if you want to be accredited by us, you will teach sustainability, because they get it. So you will see now MBA programs everywhere saying, oh, we teach sustainability. Do they? Who do they have there that you would want to study with? And that's point 2. With whom do you want to study? So this is really the question you should ask yourself about any graduate program. With whom do I want to spend the next couple years of my life? So go and meet the faculty. We offer the opportunity for prospective students to come and sit in on classes. Right now, up on the Bard campus, we're having a residency for the MBA program there. A man named Rick Stuckey is teaching finance. I mean, I'd give my eye teeth, and tomorrow I will be sitting in that finance class trying to learn from Rick. He's known down on the street as Fix-It Rick. He's the guy Citibank called in to deal with their toxic assets. If you have the opportunity to study with a Rick Stuckey, I mean, I'd take it. If you want to know finance from the people who are inside of it. The kinds of schools at which I teach do not have tenured faculty. They have practitioners. We're out in the world doing this stuff, and then we come and spend time with our students in the classroom, and then we take our students with us. I was talking with a gal who's in the dual program, taking her master's in policy and going to start in her MBA. And she was saying, I want to be in the world doing this stuff. I said, cool, come intern with me. In the MBA program, we have what's called NYC Lab. In your first year, you will get a consultancy. We will set it up for you. We take companies, nonprofits, government agencies that want student teams to work with them. And we teach you what it is to be a consultant. How do you do consulting? And you and your team will then spend the entire year, 2 semesters worth, working with a real client. I know of no other school that does that. I mean, that, I think, is worth the Bard price right there. But in all the schools where I teach, I bring my students into the companies with whom I'm working, into the intellectual challenges that I'm working on. Out at Bainbridge, where I teach, we set out, I was just in China, the Chinese have asked us to do integrated well-being index, the gentleman who spoke about GDP. What is GDP? Goods and services, but it doesn't count bads and nuisances, which are very real and which drag down our economy. We need to know whether or not we really are getting better off or worse off, and until you build one of these genuine progress indicators, you can't know. So I said to my students, if you were asked by the Chinese government to build one of these things, what would you count? And we started whiteboarding. And I was taking furious notes because that's going to get put into the Chinese Integrated Well-Being Index. So where do you want to be? With whom do you want to be studying? And then does that organization teach what it is that you want to go out in the world and do? Does it empower you to do that? And then go around and visit them. Come hang out in classes. Don't go to a school because it has a name from the last century. Lousy idea.
All right, that's probably good, right? We're a little over time. We got a couple questions in. That's some great advice. Thank you so much again. Can we get another applause? Yeah.